Hello and welcome to Communication How. And today we will be dealing with the theme, the four ways of communication. Now, basically, this refers to the ways in which we communicate with one another, the way a message is sent from the sender to a receiver. Now, what are the four ways of communication? I'm sure you might all have used this at some point of time or the other in your life. So, without any further delay, let's jump into today's topic. So, there are four usual ways of communication: verbal, non-verbal communication, written communication, and visual communication. So, as I said earlier, all of us would have used this at some point of time or the other in our lives. Even for various purposes, we tend to use all these four types of communication. How and what are these different types of communications will be dealt in today's class. So first, let us look at the first type of communication, that is the verbal communication. So verbal communication is also called as oral communication. Now, in simple terms, this refers to any communication that happens orally between people. For example, when you talk with your friends or when I'm talking to another person, that becomes oral communication because we are talking face to face and verbally. Now, what is the objective? The objective of verbal communication is to make people understand, to convey whatever you intend to convey. So to pass on the message to others as you want it to. Now, having said this, we need to come to the advantages of verbal communications. So what are the advantages? First, we see that verbal communication is more quick and precise than email. So because if you want to compose a mail, you have to sit down, you have to think what you want to write. And again, because a mail is something that gets stored, that gets recorded, you want to make sure that your sentences are grammatically correct and also that you have used the appropriate words. So there's a lot of thought process, there's a lot of thinking going on there. And as a result of it, we see that it could be time consuming. Whereas verbal communication, on the other hand, is quick and you can directly say, and okay, sometimes, of course, there may be the possibility of it being recorded, but mostly when you talk to your friends, you are not going to record it. So in that way, we see that it is more quick and you can basically speak out your heart's content. Next, we see that it becomes more effective and more convenient in conveying the message. So if I want to tell a friend, let's go to watch a movie. So if I directly call him and tell him, that becomes more effective and more convenient for the both of us. On the other hand, if I decide to send him a mail, I'm again worried whether he has seen the mail, whether he has checked his mail, or whether he's aware of it. So, in all these things, to avoid all these doubts and confusions, we see a verbal communication becomes very effective and very convenient and very easy for us to convey a message. Next, we see that verbal communication is an important and key aspect of the individual. In a way, we see that if we want to communicate something, if we are able to verbally communicate to one another, that becomes very important. And in this way, we see that in many companies now, they tend to look for people who can verbally communicate with one another. If you can express your ideas, if you can express your opinions with confidence and boldly, that is one of the qualities that is looked in today's world. So let's take a look at an example here and see how marketing executives really need verbal communication. So we see that when you are an executive of a particular company or a manager, you basically have a team to work with. And therefore, a manager has to handle a team of people. And as a result, he needs to be skilled to convince the team in acting the way he wants them to act. In order to make people work as planned, he needs to communicate well to them. And therefore, we see that they also tend to meet many different customers. And when they meet different customers, they meet people with different temperaments, with different behaviors coming from different cultures. And as a result of it, they need to be expressing their ideas in the best possible manner. Thus, we see that executives need to have excellent verbal communication skills. And here we also see that when it comes to understanding various customers, when it comes to understanding various members within the team, this also is one of an important trait of an executive. At the same time, they also need to be precise and to the point, especially when they conduct interviews and also when they are meeting and presenting certain stuff. So they can't talk for hours on one particular topic. They need to present their ideas in the brief possible manner because, as you know, in today's world, we do not have a lot of time for everything. And as a result of that, we need to be precise and to the point in what we do. And therefore, we see that all these are qualities that are required if you want to become a manager or a business executive. Now, let's take a look of an example or examples of people who were great at verbal communication. I'm sure you'll be able to recognize all of them. So we have Nelson Mandela, excellent at verbal communication. Martin Luther King, another figure who was excellent in portraying and conveying message to the others. You also had John F. Kennedy and Mahatma Gandhi. So we see that all these people were great at verbal communication. This brings us to the next type of communication, and that is the non-verbal communication. It is said that sometimes the way you act, the way you talk, or the way you dress gives an impression to the others. So therefore, when you're going to meet somebody, your body language makes an impact right at the beginning. For example, if you're not standing straight, if you look tired, or if your shirt is crumpled, or if you have worn a torn shirt, or if your hair is not properly combed, all this tends to give various messages to the people whom you encounter. And therefore, we see that even though you have not spoken anything, you have not begun your presentation, the way you have dressed, the way you have presented yourself makes a big impression. Therefore, it is necessary that one should have a strong body language. And by strong body language, you need to portray yourself at your very best. You need to present yourself at your very best. So one of the main factors here is whether you have presented yourself neat or clean. Okay, whether you have gone, if you're going for an interview, if you're going for a formal meeting, you are expected to dress up in a certain attire. You can't go for a very important executive meeting in jeans or short pants. You are expected to be in formals. So in this way, your very dressing style tends to communicate a lot to the others. Now we see that when it comes to human resource requirements, especially it is said that one of the human resource requirements for newcomers is for them to have good interpersonal skills. And this basically means that every employee should brush up their non-verbal skills. Now let's take a look at another example, how non-verbal communication is very important for a manager. Now we see that a manager should be confident. A manager who panics and who is not good at non-verbal communication will not be a favorite member within the team because his members will not look up to him. And therefore, it is important for a manager to be confident because when the manager is confident, then he will be able to convey his ideas and also build the morale of the entire group. Next, we see that the team members should also have confidence in the manager. Now, if the team members feel that the manager is not capable, they will not trust him. And if they don't trust him, then the whole rapport will not be the same. Therefore, this kind of connect between the manager and the team members is very important in order to achieve the intended goal. And therefore, we see that a manager who is not well dressed, who has the wrong body language, or who doesn't have a strong or a good body language and a strong personality will not have a huge fan following. That means he will find it difficult to interact with the group. Now, we have examples of certain non-verbal communications. Now we see that people with good personalities tend to go a long way in motivating employees who are there below them. So if an employee is demotivated, just merely keeping a hand on his shoulder or saying a few words is enough for the employee. On the other hand, if you taunt your employees or if you scold at them, you tend to demotivate them. So therefore, we see that even though you may not say something, but the very fact of ignoring another person, taunting them, or making faces when talking to them can demoralize the other person. Now here we have example of non-verbal communication. So here we have a kind of people who are good at their job. So basically here we have people working in the customer service executive, basically interacting with customers day in and day out. And if you observe both of the pictures, we see that these two people here in the pictures are quite happy. They tend to smile and they're also presenting themselves in the best possible manner to the customers. In the first picture, we have an in-person presentation, whereas the second one is over the phone. And here we see that all of them seem to be very joyful. And therefore, we see that in customer service, nonverbal and interpersonal skills play a huge role. Imagine if you are happy with a particular product and if you want some more information about the product, if you go to the customer service and the person scolds at you or the person just ignores you, of course, your experience will not be that good. On the other hand, if you have bought a particular product and you find that it is not working, hence you want to go and get it replaced or get it serviced. When you go to the customer executive and if the person smiles or welcomes you or listens to what you have to say and also promises you to get it replaced, no matter how angry you were that the product wasn't working, you now will have a different kind of a mood. And this is exactly what is expected of people working at such jobs. Their whole thing is to get the customers to feel at ease, to make customers happy. So even if a product isn't working properly, they could change the mood and they could still persuade the customers to continue buying their products. So therefore, we see that all this non-verbal communications play a huge part in the customer service department and also in various ways of our lives. Even among friends, we tend to communicate a lot through non-verbal communications. So examples of non-verbal communications include having a good smile. So when you smile and when you portray yourself as a happy person, you tend to send positive vibes to others in the group. And this is very important because when you tend to spread positive vibes, the whole atmosphere is positively charged. And as a result, you too then get a lot of energy to proceed with your goal. Next, body language of reassurance. If a person is positive, if a person has a good body language, he's able to build up the morale of the team, even in difficult situations. Next is listening ability. If a person is good at listening, if a person can accommodate the other person by listening to him, listening to what the other person has to say, this is very important when it comes to non-verbal communications. And at the same time, when it comes to customer executives, they need to have great interpersonal skills and they need to be focused on customer satisfaction. So in this way, we see that all these qualities are essential in order for a person to become a good communicator verbally as well as non-verbally. Next, we come to the written communications. Now, we see that written communications are used in many ways. I'm sure that all of us use it on a daily basis, whether it is in electronic form or whether it is using a simple paper and pen. Now, we see that with the coming of smartphones and the internet, there's been a boom of written communications because nowadays we see one of the most common forms of written communication tends to be the email. But slowly we see now non more informal modes of communications with WhatsApp and other online messaging apps are being used more regularly than the email. Now, therefore, as I said, email has been replaced by WhatsApp and the other apps, online messaging apps. So let's now come to the formal and informal written communication. So it is said that WhatsApp messages are also in a certain way considered legal in court. That means if we visit a court of law, you will find that even WhatsApp messages are considered to be legal in nature. In fact, there have been so many cases of celebrities who are brought under the scanner because of wrong written communications on their social media accounts. And therefore, when anything is posted on social media, you need to be very careful because it can be seen by the entire world. And therefore, when you post something that is controversial, when you post something that affects another community, you tend to play with their sentiments, play with their feelings, and offend them. And as a result of this, wrong messages could land you in trouble. So, therefore, you have to be very careful when it comes to written communication because it is stored, it is recorded. Let's take an example. If you post something on Facebook which is quite controversial, then you realize that it is controversial and you delete the post. But for that 30 minutes or even for the 10 minutes that the post was online, maybe thousands of people have seen it. Some of them may even have taken a screenshot. So even though you have deleted the post, still whatever you have posted remains because if someone has taken a screenshot, that is quite valid evidence. So therefore, you need to be very careful, especially when you're using social media, whenever you post anything on social media. Therefore, all these things are good. Social media is good. It is good to pass on message to make people aware. But at the same time, it needs to be used safely and effectively. Now, there's a difference between communication with friends and communication with professionals. So here we can see that when it comes to friends, we normally tend to have a kind of a leisurely chat. We just talk on normal issues. Whereas when it comes to professional, there's a different way how we approach things. And in this way, we see that there are certain advantages as well as disadvantages when it comes to written communication. Now, let's take a look at the disadvantages. So here we see that one of the disadvantages, it tends to become too formal. Okay, so if everything you want to communicate through written communication, then it becomes very formal. On the other hand, it also might incite the ego of others. So if you have posted something that is controversial, it can also then lead to the fact that people may get overexcited or people may get offended. And therefore, that could also create problems because it is recorded, it is stored, and since it is written, it is like the final word. Therefore, in many political issues, if something is written which is controversial, it can create further problems. Now, let's take a look at the formal versus informal communication. So when it comes to these two, here we see that formal communications would basically involve emails, letterheads, memos, and reports. It would also mean documented evidence, because in a way, whatever is formal, you would like to document it, and therefore it is used in case you have to go back to it at some time in the future. When it comes to informal communication, we have things like social media, WhatsApp, SMS, and various other things wherein you informally send messages to one another. So here there's nothing official in this. It is just done for the sake of conveying a message to another person. There is nothing to be recorded, nothing to be stored. And this is also called as grapevine communication. Now, what is grapevine communication? Now we see that grapevine communication refers to communication without any particular agenda. Let's take an example. When you go to meet your friends, okay, when you go to maybe a restaurant to have lunch with your friends, you don't go there with an agenda, right? So when you go there, you begin to start talking and the conversation goes from one topic to another. So you don't have somebody who is moderating the session, nor do you have somebody who is taking down notes or taking down points. And this is called grapevine communication. So a communication that happens without any formalities, without any particular structure. And we see that when it comes to informal communication, there is no specific channel with regards to this. So having said that, let's come to some of the advantages of formal communication. So basically, formal communication is used to finalize a policy. So if you have taken a decision on a particular issue, in order to finalize it, you need something that is written concretely and formally. And in this way, formal communication plays a very important role. If you're formalizing a kind of an sales agreement, it has to be written precisely and it has to be to the point. So in this way, it becomes very useful. Next, to decide the course of action. If you have come up with an action plan, it needs to be formally communicated so that the others know that it is a serious matter and that they need to do what is required. At the same time, it is also used when you establish procedures and follow up. So when you are setting up certain goals, certain procedures to be followed in the company or even in your institution, and when you want it to be followed up, things have to be written and it has to be formally communicated, because once it is stored, you can then look back at it and say that in this meeting, we have decided to do all these things. And as the result of it, we need to complete all these steps. Next, we also see official plans and promises. So if you have made a promise, in the sense when it comes to loans, when it comes to certain business agreements, those are like official plans and therefore they have to be done formally, because it becomes documented and it is used as evidence in the future. Now, what are the advantages of informal communication? Well, informal communication, one of the biggest advantage is the open door policy, which basically means that you don't have to be too formal. You can speak out when and where you want. It encourages creativity because people feel free to share their ideas. They don't have to follow a particular channel. They don't have to follow any particular means in order to communicate their ideas. It doesn't incite fear. So the people are not fearful. They can freely communicate as and what they want. And it also encourages more people, because sometimes we see when it comes to formally communicating, we tend to be slightly held back because we are not sure how the people may look at it, how the people may communicate. And as a result of this, we see that informal communication tends to be very effective in this way of encouraging people. Finally, we come to visual communication. And here we see that this is used prominently in the medical field, in the medical industry. Now we see that new medicines which come into the market have to be shown to the doctors. and their advantages have to be explained. And at such times, the medical representatives carry informative pamphlets which are shown to the doctors and are then given to the doctors. And these informative pamphlets have all the information about the medicine so that the doctors can feel confident in suggesting the medicine to their patients. Similarly, it is said many industries are also using visual communication to help interaction with their customers so that they can communicate their ideas in a much better manner. And we also see that explainer videos are used in order to explain the workings of certain products. So I'm sure if you visit certain websites, you will see that if there's a particular product, the company will have a video on how to use it, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages. Because visual communication tends to be quite effective in portraying people how to use certain things. Because once you look at it, it becomes much easier to perform the task. Next, let us take a look at certain key elements in visual communications. So colors. So we see colors are very important because they tend to create an impression. They tend to attract you. When you see something more colorful, you are likely to click on it. You are likely to be interested in it. Design, logo and brand design is very important because when you look at a particular design, if you like it, if it is attractive, you're more likely to purchase or maybe have a look at that particular product. And therefore, they see when a logo is prominent, it becomes much more useful for the company to capture the attention of the potential buyers. Next, advertising is very important. How you advertise, what you advertise is of paramount importance. Animations are a great way of portraying your ideas to others. It creates interest in the people and it also attracts the younger crowd. Illustrations, very important to explain tough concepts. So when you have certain illustrations, drawings, you are able to explain tough concepts in simple words to the people. People are able to understand it in simple words and as a result are able to grasp the entire concept. Typography, also very important. How the font, what font is used, how it is projected is very important. Presentations are very important. And also you have video resumes, again, which make a big impact on the people. Now, having said this, we come to person-to-person communication. And it is said that when it comes to communicating with others on a one-to-one level, certain methods such as diagrams that teachers use for students on the blackboards make a big difference because through diagrams, the teachers are able to portray to the students what is exactly they want to convey. Now we see that also PowerPoints, graphs, and other modes of presentation are used in order to convey ideas to the others. And in this way, we see that visual communication tends to play a very important role in today's world. Now, at the same time, we see that all these forms of communication, that is verbal, non-verbal, written, and visual communications, play an important role in our lives. And all of us use it at some point of time or the other. But what is important is that we need to use these effectively. We need to understand the advantages and the disadvantages and use it in the best possible manner. So this is all for today's class on the 4 ways of communication. Next time we will deal with the forms of communication. Thank you.